it had disarmed the police forces because they were planning to arm fanatics in today's march. Mr. Thabane fled to South Africa, where he held emergency talks on the situation on Sunday. There is no news of what emerged from the talks between him and his two deputies and South Africa's President Jacob Zuma. Lesotho, a mountain kingdom entirely surrounded by South Africa, has experienced several military takeovers since independence in 1966. The Libyan government has confirmed that Libya's militias have captured most government militaries in the capital, Tripoli. Armed men had blocked staff from entering offices, and on Sunday, militiamen also seized the U.S. embassy with videos showing cheering men diving from a balcony into a swimming pool. Libya has been hit by anarchy since Colonel Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown by the NATO-backed militias back in 2011. The militias have been fighting for power among themselves since then, with an Islamist-linked group, Libya Dawn, capturing Tripoli last week. Well, we told you about our lead story on the bulletin today. That's the Ukraine crisis. And we're now being joined live on The World Today by the Voice of America's Daniel Scherf, who is in the capital, Kiev. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us on The World Today. Now, we understand that Ukrainian forces have withdrawn from the airports of the eastern city of Luhansk after all-night clashes with pro-Russian rebels. Can you confirm this information?
Yes, the Ukrainian side confirmed today that, in fact, they would have to organize an orderly withdrawal of their troops as they were under intense pressure from Russian rebels. They say that Russian military was directly involved in supporting those rebels, both with artillery fire and with tanks. It's very difficult, of course, from where we are to. It certainly does put a lot of pressure on the government here in Kiev, and also on the peace talks that are taking place in Minsk.
Now, speaking of Minsk, Daniel, can you brief us on the activities going on there concerning the negotiators' meeting?
Well, for today, there was a direct representatives, the OSCE representative, and an unofficial representative of the government here in Ukraine, former President Kuchma. The rebels in Moscow were trying to push for a unconditional ceasefire by all sides, whereas Ukraine is still wanting to have a disarmament of the rebels before they're able to move forward. So there's a little bit of a difference in the viewpoint still, but we are seeing the rebel side saying that they are willing to look more at autonomy rather than complete separatism. So there is at least a slight positive movement forward, but we'll have to see where those talks go when they sit down again to discuss some of these details, including exchange of prisoners and hostages.
Now, Daniel, the rebels seem to have been gaining ground in recent days, and of course, Russia has been accused of aiding them. What else have they been accused of doing concerning the situation in Ukraine?
Well, mainly many Western capitals, and here in Kiev, they accuse Russia of lying, of maintaining this position that they are not involved directly militarily or in any sort of material way supporting the rebels, even though we're seeing a great amount of circumstantial evidence that, in fact, Russian hardware is getting to the rebels, and that Russian military themselves have been involved here in Ukraine. We saw just last week that there were 9 or 10 Russian paratroopers who were captured inside Ukraine on Ukrainian territory. And of course, Moscow came out with a very quick statement that they had accidentally or mistakenly crossed over the border. But very few people, very few capitals believe that. So there's a lot of suspicion that Moscow is saying one thing and doing the exact opposite.
Finally, I spoke to you earlier, Daniel, and you told us about an attack on a Coast Guard which was attacked in Mariupol yesterday. Could you give us the details on that attack?
Yeah, that's right. Yesterday, there were 2 Coast Guard vessels off the port city of Mariupol in Ukraine that came under a missile attack. And one of the vessels was sunk. There were a number of sailors who were rescued. I haven't seen any reports yet of any casualties, but it certainly does mark an escalation in this conflict, and that it was the first conflict, the first clash at sea apparently between the pro-Russia rebels and the Ukrainian side. And this is the ongoing intense pressure that we're seeing from the pro-Russia rebels as they're moving towards Mariupol, and a lot of concern that that will be the next target of the rebels.
Well, thank you very much. I've been speaking with the Voice of America's Daniel Scherf, who was telling us about the Ukraine crisis, and he was talking to us from the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. Thank you very much. Now, while in Nigeria, the fight against the Ebola virus continues, it remains a major struggle for West African countries. The strategy for combing the disease has come under summary and has exhibited for a lot. I beg your pardon here. Anyway, we have a track up from Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, who spoke to our correspondent Amarachi Ubani concerning the matter, and here's what he had to say about it.
If you adopt a beggar my neighbor policy, which is Ebola, Nigerian problem, Ebola, West African problem, therefore, no planes from West Africa, no this, no that, fine. When next you suffer your own swine flu, whatever it is, then, we say that's a Chinese problem. All Chinese, time to start going back home. We don't want you to come back here. That doesn't solve the problem. What Ebola and the swine flu and the Nile virus, whatever it is, what they are teaching us is that the world is a global village. This is not 1700. This is not 1500 anymore. Every day, millions of people in this world travel. They move across borders. Therefore, we must design a global medical health system so that with, if you like, what will you call it, alarm spots, so that the moment something happens, you don't say that's a Chinese problem. You say, this is a world problem. Let's tackle it. It happened, Lassa fever. Don't say it's a Nigerian problem. So don't let the Cameroonians say, oh, we are shutting our border against Nigeria because they Lassa something. Immediately, the World Health Organization, you set up laboratories, clinics all around the world so that every issue is now a global issue. It's not a national issue.
Now, despite the fact that thousands of people die annually trying to migrate illegally to Europe, about 4,000 more people took the risk this weekend, and without surprise, it was near fatal. Well, thankfully, the Italian Navy came to their rescue, and the civil war in Syria and breakdown of order in Libya have pushed the number of seaborne arrivals in Italy to a record of more than 100,000 this year, straining the resources of its Navy and Coast Guard. Italy's Navy has been patrolling the waters between Africa and Sicily since October, when 366 people drowned after their boat capsized just a mile from the Italian island of Lampedusa. That prompted the launch of Mare Nostrum, or RC, search and rescue mission, which has been costing Italy $12 billion a month. But Italy has repeatedly called for Frontex, Europe's border control agency, to take over it and for other members of states to share the burden. Frontex Plus will be launched in November as the EU prepares to take over the burden from Italy. Now, if you thought that having pets was just for show or unnecessary, you might need to think again, because having a pet could actually save your life.
A tabby cat called Sally is being hailed a hero after she saved her owner from his burning home. 49-year-old Craig Jeeves shared how the quick-thinking feline managed to wake him up when the house caught fire.
She jumped on my head and sort of just screaming at me and woke me up, or else I wouldn't have got up.
Jeeves said he adopted Sally from a cat's home several years ago, and now she had returned the favor. The fire service deems him nothing short of lucky, as he might not have gotten out alive.
He was alerted to the cat, actually removed himself from the house, and it was only the crews found him at a later stage once they were actually on scene. He apparently came out of the bush, so very thankful that the owner actually got out of the house in time.
I'm alive, but Yeah, you replace things but not memories. Photos are all gone. Trips to Canada, skiing trips I did all overseas, they're all gone.
Jeeves was treated for smoke inhalation at the scene and will be staying with neighbours until he is able to rebuild the property.
Now, finally, a new gold rush has gripped a seaside town on the British coast, with hundreds of people turning up with metal detectors as well as shovels trying to find 30 bars of 24-karat gold hidden under sand. The gold is not a natural deposit found on the beach in Folkestone's Outer Harbour, but rather the handiwork of German artist Michael Sailstorfer, who buried the bars as part of an art project. The knowledge that gold worth a total of $15,000 is waiting to be dug up has led to many heading down to the beach to dig for treasure.
Well, we just kind of picked one area and we're kind of working our way round, widening it as we go, and hopefully we might find something before the tide comes in. So we're just going to keep digging, see what happens.
Tourists to Folkestone in Kent also seem willing to put in the hours of toil required to find the hidden gold.
Well, we arrived at 9. We'll stay until the tide stops us, and then we'll be back when it goes back out again. We'll start again. And then I'll come back tomorrow and do the same.
Anyone who is eager to find the gold has been encouraged to search the beach at 4 p.m. after low tide. It also appears that the first gold bar has been found. According to a BBC report, the broadcaster has said that a group of 3 people found a gold bar worth more than $8,000, having spent 1 hour digging. The project is called Folkestone Digs and is part of the town's triennial celebrations. The likes of John Lennon's widow and artist Yoko Ono will be at the festival, which is due to run from August 30 until November the 2nd. And that's the world today. Thank you for watching. I'm Cynthia Araya. Up next is Sports News.